She rolled over onto her side, feeling the frustrating sensation in her gut intensify. The hunger wasn't all that puzzling, considering Cereza had only a few pieces off of a charcuterie tray before going to bed, but even so, she couldn't remember the last time her stomach had woken her up. Now in view, she studied her partner. The other witch was asleep, and so she did her best to remove the blanket without waking her before creeping her way into the kitchen. What do I even want? Stopping, she realized she couldn't quite decide. Immediately her hand reached for the first thing she saw, an apple sitting in a bowl on the counter, but she withdrew it at the halfway point. No. Chewing through that thing is a chore. I want something fun. She opened the cupboard, excitement at whatever it was she thought she was going to find disappearing into thin air seconds later. It was empty. Embarrassingly so. The most appetizing thing there was the near-week-old loaf of Nottingham bread, which she absolutely wasn't touching. A wave of disappointment washed over her. She was aware of the situation. After all, the only dinner they could make out of the near-desolate kitchen had been a plate of cold cuts, cheese, and crackers. The fact had seemingly slipped away from her conscience when she had woken up half asleep that early morning, and so there she stood, disheartened. As the apple from previous suddenly became a much more appetizing concept, Cereza was about to turn around only to be stunned in place by hands wrapping around her exposed belly. Nearly jumping out of her skin, she realized she wasn't as quiet as she had thought when she snuck out of bed. Out for a midnight snack? She smiled, meeting the hands closed around her with her own. Something like that. I hope I didn't wake you, darling. Oh, don't worry. I could go for a bite myself. Removing her hands, Jean walked around, passing the kitchen aisle and laying against the main counter, looking at her. The only thing the woman had on was the laced underwear and bra she had slept in. It was a good bit distracting, especially as the moonlight from the kitchen window lit up her fair skin, but even with that imagery Cereza was still more interested in what she had gotten up for, food. Unfortunately, there really isn't much to speak of here. We really should go shopping tomorrow, you know. Weren't we supposed to do that today? Something came up. Maybe if you weren't so lenient with when your students took their makeup exams, you'd be home on time every night. She paced up intimately into Jean's space, who in turn fell backwards onto the counter. Then I really wouldn't be a good teacher, don't I? Their lips hovered a few inches apart, the younger waiting for the older to push into her, before freezing just before the kiss. Is there a reason you're making me wait, Cereza? Amicham. That damned cherry lipstick will make me even hungrier. I did wash my face before bed. The taste lingers. Quickly their positions resumed to what they had been before, Cereza visibly pouting over the lack of something to snack on. So there's nothing here you're interested in? No, there's not. Jean removed herself from the counter, pacing over to her friend. If you could have anything, then, what would it be? Anything? Anything at all. Really, what I want is a burger. A burger? Yes. A cheeseburger. Since when did you enjoy grubby American food? Since when have I not? In moderation, anyway. Then, I suppose there's only one thing to do. They shared a look, before Jean smiled, stepping into the more spacious parlor and snapping her fingers. Instantaneously, her long hair flowed around her body, drawing contiguous lines across her skin until it formed a cohesive outfit. It was a dress, off-white and structured to her form, almost identical to her normal combat suit in coloration. Jean. We're going to get you a burger. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. Where would we get one? McDonald's has a few locations open 24 hours, right? Are you really proposing we go to that place? What's wrong, Cereza? Is that a little too cheap for your taste? She thought for a moment. The witch had never been to such a standardized fast food joint, she had never had the need, nor the want. From what she did know, the chains were obsessed with profit scraping and saving money wherever possible, some notable points being the quality of ingredients and the inexperienced cooks assembling it. But, even still, in that moment, it sounded fulfilling. Of course not. How disconnected do you think I am? I love fast food as much as your next girl. The words had bubbled up with obvious uncertainty. Expecting a reaction, she was nervous to see Jean only smile. Then, let's go. My treat. Cereza watched as Jean fished her keys off of the wall, the rung featuring her motorcycle fob, no less, before she stood with her hands on her hips, waiting for something. Let's. I think it'd be best if you dressed first. She stopped, realizing she was still in her minimal sleepwear. Quickly, she followed what the other woman had done, commanding her hair to form something generic and feminine. Hungry as she was, the outfit achieved was a little long, much more appropriate for a ballroom versus an ordinary outing. That's a look. Definitely a look, oh, sod off. Just give me a moment. Taking a breath, she focused. The long flow of the dress closed, first its base fading away, then removing entirely as it tightened to her legs an inch up from her ankles. She let the context of what she wanted continuing to occupy her mentality, and the fabric became much more fashionable, extending into a perfectly fitting garment. There's the witch I know. Are you driving, or am I? Oh, come on. She followed Jean out the door of the apartment after slipping on some heels, locking the door behind her and making her way down the steps into the parking lot. The motorcycle stood innocently still, up until its owner approached, and it instantaneously lit up its bright headlights. Jean, why is it you even have keys for a bike you don't need to unlock? Straddling the vehicle, the Platinum Witch paused a moment before replying, inserting the redundant key into the receptacle. Appearances, darling. Last thing I need is a student of mine believing I have a magic motorcycle. Now, get on. Cereza obliged, and quickly, they took off. It had been quite some time since she had been on it. The cold wind seemed to pick up, and she tightened her hands around Jean's waist. Something was ridiculously romantic about the environment. She watched over the driving shoulder as they picked up, dodging and excelling past the few late-night traffic cars in the city. Only a few minutes later, they arrived.
This is a moment
the building
I've
was
long
much more
desired.
polished than she expected. It had a cold style, shaded stone not at all clashing with brighter tones and instead meeting similar colors, forcing the overall appearance of the restaurant into one of corporate boredom. Only outside did it seem to fight against the bright yellow arches that were the logo, but as they entered she found no contrast within, save the annoying LCD displays that indicated the menu and upcoming orders. I really can't believe you've never been to one before. Well, Jean, I ordinarily try to eat better. Please. Don't give me that. I remember you going off and cooking 8 pieces of French toast one morning because you were, how did you put it, bored. Hey, that was. Aha. That was you. Now, go on. We're the only ones here, so you're ordering. Fuck. I am, aren't I? What? What the hell do I choose? Cereza stared up at the menu. Each option was illuminated bright, with pictographic displays. They all looked equally appetizing, the advertisements identical, and she couldn't choose. So instead of walking up to the cashier who was very clearly waiting for her, she stood still, relying on her partner for advice. What am I supposed to get? Jean rolled her eyes. Whatever looks appetizing, I suppose. All of it does. And, also, none of if it does. I don't know. Cereza. You first. Quickly, she jumped behind Jean, pushing the other witch towards the cashier.
Ta-ta.
Oh, for the love of. What can I get for you today? The friendly tone of the young woman behind the McDonald's till chirped up. Cereza watched studiously as Jean placed an order, much to her annoyance. I'll get, a McChicken combo. Sure. That comes with fries, and a medium fountain drink. Is that all? She paused for a moment, knowing Cereza would have issues with ordering an item like this. So instead of forcing her partner to interact in an unfamiliar environment in which she was anxious, Jean decided to order for her, not before fishing for approval. One moment. She stepped backwards, turning towards her. How about a Big Mac? A what? It's like the one McDonald's item they're known for. I suppose.
Perhaps.
It is a cheeseburger, right? 2 patties, and 3 buns. 2. 3. Is that too much? No, it's just surprising. Well, you can always get a smaller sandwich. Like you said, it's a classic, right? I'd be a fool not to get a Big Mac. Lovely. She turned back to the cashier, adding the item as Cereza paced awkwardly behind them. I'll also take a Big Mac combo as well. And add a handful of ketchup packets. All right. Your total is displayed there. Cash or card? Visa. You can tap when ready. And Jean did so, nonchalantly as the prompt came up on the pin pad. But just behind her, Cereza was watching with a strange curiosity. How informal. Paying before your order even begins cooking, let alone after you've eaten. What a bizarre restaurant. How many times has Jean been here? Your order number is 915. She nodded, grabbing the 2 fountain cups and the receipt she was given before moving away from the line and to the left. Seeing she had nowhere else to go, Cereza stepped up and followed Jean to the drink dispenser, before she was past her container. She grabbed the cup. It lacked both a lid and a straw, and so she didn't know exactly what to do with it. Are you excited, Cereza? Your first time at McDonald's? I'm really not sure. This entire restaurant seems backwards. But you are hungry. Yes, I am. Then I'm sure it'll be good. I can't wait to see what you think of fast food. Do be gentle with those comments of yours. This is my first time, after all. As she spoke, she found that Jean had cornered her, pushing her up against the pillar she had her back against. Quickly, the other witch stole a kiss. Hey! You can't just use words like that and expect me to contain myself. Jean. How scandalous is it to kiss inside of a McDonald's? It's like this is the only place you can take your mistress, without chances of being seen. They kissed again, unaware of the handful of late-night restaurant patrons watching them. Must we roleplay here of all places? Quiet, darling, or next time I'll take you to Burger King. See, I really don't know if that's a bad thing, considering I've never been to. 915. Hearing her order called, Jean moved off and back to the counter, grabbing the thin paper bag the worker presented to her. Well, that was certainly quick. After taking it, she worked her way over to the drink dispenser, beckoning Cereza over. Quickly she filled up her own cup with a handful of ice cubes, followed by Diet Cola. Now, I know this infernal device seems complex, but do listen. I know how to use a damned drink dispenser. Do you, now? And here I was thinking this was your first time. Showing off her prowess, she poured into her cup, picking the bright red fruit punch because of how amazingly the label was colored. When she was finished, she struggled to cap her drink, not really sure how the plastic was supposed to align. Jean showed up behind her, taking hold of her lid and forcing it onto the paper cup. Thank you, darling. These things can be tricky, for sure. I don't suppose you forgot ice on purpose, did you? Cereza remembered her process, realizing she, in fact, had. Oh, you. Don't worry. If you drink it fast enough, it'll stay cold. Due to the near-empty restaurant, they picked a booth near the window, one where they could make out Jean's motorcycle through the stale nighttime air. They both put their bags up on the table, withdrawing their meals and looking at each other. What? Nothing. Just, enjoy. And she did. Her stomach rumbling, she opened the hinged box, finding the sandwich. It was different than what she expected. I suppose that shouldn't surprise me. Removing it from the package, she studied it. Compared to the sandwiches on the advertisements, the colors were a little duller, and the sauce didn't quite perfectly exude from each corner as indicated. But it looked good enough. She hadn't quite realized the magnitude that 3 buns and 2 patties provided, and so she had to squish it down in preparation. Before she went for a bite, her attention switched to Jean. The other witch had already dug in, and in a most bizarre fashion. Her own burger wrapping was being used as a tray in which she emptied ketchup packets onto, before dipping her chicken sandwich into them and taking a bite. What is it? You look like you've done this before. She laughed, reaching for a French fry. Darling, I was one of McDonald's first customers. The evolution of restaurants was among my favorite things to study over the last few centuries. Did you know, for example, that the hamburger was widely considered to originate from Hamburg, Germany? Only to be popularized by American. Trailing off, she realized Cereza was hesitant about taking a bite. Cereza? Why yes. Are you going to eat your Big Mac? Absolutely. Jean put her sandwich down, choosing instead to fixate on her partner as she snacked on fries. Well, go on. Realizing she was being spectated, Cereza went in, taking a bite a good bit bigger than what was necessary. As her teeth met and the food was severed, the immediate rush of salt was evident. It was present in the sauce, the bread, even the meat, only to be interrupted by a much stronger tang of something bizarre. EW. Is that what? She chewed, swallowing the portion quickly after realizing what was in her food. That was a pickle. Oh, darling, I forgot to ask them to hold pickles. You should have told me. I didn't know there were damned pickles. Jean couldn't help but laugh. She was well aware of her partner's disgust for the vegetables, but hadn't quite let on the fact that there was one within the sandwich. It was a very rare occasion that she ever got to see the comedic expression of Cereza snacking on one. Jean. You knew, didn't you? Maybe. Well, that's absolutely ruined my appetite. I'm sorry, darling. Here, let me. Jean reached for the sandwich, willing to open the bun and pick the rest of the vegetables off only for her hand to be swatted away. No. No. I'll eat it. In the way it was intended. How bold. And she did, with a supreme focus. Cereza ate the sandwich. It wasn't all bad. There was a certain spectacular addiction that the tan-colored sauce spiked within her appetite. Really, it felt like the cheap meat, lettuce, and bun were nothing more than a vessel to deliver the condiment onto her tongue. And she was fine with it. At least, until her teeth dug into another pickle. When she neared the end of the burger, she suddenly remembered the fountain drink she had gotten, and so she took a sip. Oh my God. She caught herself, covering her mouth as she realized just how loud she was. Are you alright? It's just this damn drink. It's so fucking sweet. Surprised? I'm not sure. She took another sip, recoiling almost as quickly as she had before. The second time around, with shocking first impressions out of the way, she was able to sample the drink properly. And then some. She worked the straw, sucking down the contents quickly. You certainly look happy. Stopping to breath, she looked at her partner. That is so fucking good. I never took you for a fan of Fruitopia. It's... Oh my God. It's... Finishing it, she put the cup back down, a look on her face idling halfway between satisfaction and confusion, her eyes glazed over. Finishing her own sandwich, Jean looked at Cereza, curious about what exactly the witch was going through. Are we alright over there? Yeah. Sorry. That was, just, the best thing I've ever tasted. It was perfection. My God. She didn't know quite exactly how to respond. Well, I'm glad. Don't forget to finish up your fries, before they get cold. I think I'm fine. Really? Yes. I'm perfect. That was just what I needed. Jean polished off her own last few fries, only taking a sip of her drink as she made a silent note to find some of the branded fruit punch the next time she was at a grocery store, and stock the fridge with it. I suppose you'd want to head back, then? Oh, if you're still eating, then please. Throwing the packaging of her meal back into the paper bag, Jean wiped her mouth with a napkin, before also depositing it. I'm finished. Let's go, darling. Unfamiliar with disposing of fast food wrappings after a meal, Cereza followed her partner, stuffing the packaging back into the bag from where it had came save her paper cup. Then they stood up, walking over to the open-top garbage disposal that stood a few feet away. They dropped them inside, but she hadn't let go of her cup yet. Are you keeping it as a souvenir? After asking, Jean noticed she was eyeing the drink machine. No. I was just wondering, do you think I can get a refill? She laughed. Oh, go ahead, Cereza. Who's going to stop you? Smiling, the witch made her way back to the machine, dispensing fruit punch until the cup was full to the brim and haphazardly remembering to add ice, before finally recapping it and making her way back to Jean as she sipped. Shall we head off, then? Amichum. They moved off towards the door they had entered through, and into the early morning. The cold air didn't nip quite as hard as it did on their way there, no doubt due to Cereza's appetite being sated. Jean? She stopped her just before she had started her motorcycle. Yes? Thank you for taking me out. Oh, please. It's just McDonald's, darling. But you bothered to take me, just because I was hungry and wanted something that we didn't have at home. And that means a good bit to me. Cereza sipped another bit of her fruit punch, before walking up a few steps and giving her partner an equally sweet kiss. Jean blushed, standing and collecting herself as the bike engine idled, waiting for them. Then. I suppose we'll go for fast food more often. I'd like that. Only, no pickles next time. Yes, Cereza. No pickles.